form now, but let's see. We are live, apparently. I'm never totally sure. So I'm going to also check on my phone in case we just talk. Although we could talk to each other for an hour, which would be quite nice too. But the point is to share our views with everyone else. So anyway, if you're watching, hello, welcome along to this Talented People live session. It is excellent to be talking to you all. I'm Kimberly Godbolt. I run Talented People along with Rosie Turner and my lovely team. And if you haven't joined us for one of these before, you know, please feel free to go and look at other ones we've done. We tend to try and do topical discussions based on what's happening in the industry right now in TV and digital. They're all on our website, which is talentedpeople.tv. And really, we just love bringing the conversation about the industry, you know, making things, production management, diversity and inclusion, all these things about people, which is what we love to do everything with at Talented People to you, because let's face it, creative world can be quite isolating. And sometimes you think you're the only one sitting at your desk going through these sorts of things or asking these sorts of questions. And we can assure you that you are not. So anyway, today's session is about flexible working. Where are we at right now? I mean, it's a topic that we have been talking about a lot over the past couple of months, especially, I think, into 2023. You know, we've got employers at various stages of their own thought process about what flexible actually means. We've got employees, freelancers with various commitments and the world having changed around them, perhaps being asked to come back to the office, and those loving or expecting to be back in the office with their team 5 days a week. So I thought this was a good opportunity to put together a bunch of very nice people to talk it through and share their own experiences and opinions on flexible working, working from home, everything that encompasses. So let me introduce my guests. They are Elaine de Cruz, who is co-founder of Project 23 and Coaches of Colour. Hi, Elaine.
Hello, afternoon, morning, wherever you are.
Hello. Hayley, Sarian. Hi, Hayley. Hayley's a freelance producer and director and developer. Oh, and edit producer, just, you know, adding to all your titles. Yes.
Thank you.
Joshua Marshall. Hello, Joshua. Joshua is a senior producer specialising in visuals, post-production and CGI, looking at your latest email sign-off, which I very much enjoyed.
It changes every day, depending on the mood I'm in. But no, welcome to... Nice to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to chat about all things.
You're very welcome. And Belinda Cherrington. Hi, Belinda. Belinda is a creative director and exec producer in Factual. Welcome along.
Hi, it's great to be here.
And then Jason Mitchell. Jason, hello. Jason has very kindly stepped in. You might notice he doesn't look like Evie Sangal from Story Films, and that is because he is not. He has very kindly dropped in from Austin, Texas, you know, as you do, because Evie has unfortunately been called away to a production drama. So thank you for joining us, Jason.
My pleasure. My caffeine will arrive any minute now, so forgive me for the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, maybe we'll go to someone else first, then, or you rub your bleary eyes. Right, let's get stuck in then. Wow, there's lots of you watching. I do think we've hit on something here. Hayley, I'm going to ask you first. What do you think the temperature is regarding working from home versus bums on seats and working in telly right now?
Well, I think, first of all, you've got to think that my perspective is a little bit odd. Okay, so I'm a returner to TV. So I have my background's in primetime factual. I've used those skills to go into academia as head of year of the TV production course at Bournemouth Uni, into commercial and branded, and into animation development. And now I'm coming back to factual. So as I'm coming back in, I'm now based in Bournemouth. What are the job opportunities for me? And I'm getting in touch with production companies. And I would say it's mixed. I'd say that there's high confidence in high volume returning series. in terms of doing, sort of flexible working, remote working. But I would say it's definitely not being considered as standard. And actually, one of the things that sort of people are saying is, well, we would consider it for the right person. And from that, I take it's actually, if that person was in the flesh, bums on seats, that is by far preferable. So I think that it's not being considered as standard. And I think that the majority of job posts that I'm seeing at the moment ask for you to be physically in an office in London or a regional hub.
Okay, interesting. And actually, Joshua, so you are a fellow freelancer. So how does that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not TV specifically. I'm sort of looking at this from the more of a niche of advertising, marketing, online, digital, that kind of sort of perspective and purview. But I've noticed a major shift within freelancing for myself. So if you think, let's say from 2020 onwards, I was working a full-time role when COVID hit, and as a project manager in, well, not quite London, Slough. And when Boris Johnson was about to, tell everyone, you must lock down, no one's allowed out, that kind of thing, I literally shoved as much as I could in the back of a car and drove from Slough back to Manchester, back to the north to sort of be with my family, because it was very uncertain times. No one quite knew if it was a lockdown for a few days or the end of the world. So I've seen it from both a bums on seats sort of office role to then that kind of overnight switch into a remote capacity. And then since then, I've worked pretty much, well, entirely remotely, except for the occasional day in London here or shoot days or things like that, when obviously being there physically is required. But I've noticed almost so my last contract ended at the end of, let's say, October. And then I actually went around Eastern Europe, just to make everyone feel awful. I had a little holiday. I went around Eastern Europe. It was lovely. About 3 months backpacking and, sojourning and adventuring. And then before then, I was being contacted all the time. When I was traveling abroad, I had to knock these jobs back. They were being, given to me. And I said, no, I'm traveling. And I didn't worry because I was like, well, the market's not going to change. Obviously, remote working is here to stay. Since the new year, every single job that I have been either contacted in regards to as a freelancer or applied for, they have said we need someone in London 3 days a week. Now that's not I'm not lying. It every single role has said you must be in London 3 days a week. So that is the disparity. That is the change over the course of maybe 3 or 4 months. And I was out of the UK, so I'm able to understand those two. I sort of had that middle ground of being abroad so I remember exactly what it was like when I left, and I remember exactly what it was like when I came back. Anyway, I'll stop waffling, but that's been mine. I agree totally. It's now gone to must be 3 days a week in London, and they won't consider you otherwise.
I think that's where it's a bit mad, actually.
Yeah, go on, Elaine.
Sorry, I was going to just add, I think that's where it's a bit, because I'm like you, Joshua, I work across a number of different industries. So we get to see probably about 50% of our clients are still in similar industries, actually, that you mentioned, Joshua: advertising, marketing, creatives, TV, film. But then we also have like actual rocket scientists, charities, not like a whole bunch of other different types. And so what I find really interesting is that there's definitely been a shift since January. And I wonder if it's just coming from other organizations or even other CEOs or HR directors talking to other HR directors and saying, what are you doing? Or I'm going to do that. Because the data says, like, there was a Gallup report that said almost the opposite. Like, the optimum amount for engagement, productivity, like results, basically, across different industries, albeit, is like 3 to 4 days offsite, 60 to 80% not in the office, is brilliant and is showing kind of the results that we want. But I think we're still not able to manage, or what does that look like then when someone's predominantly out of the office? And we've kind of all just gone back to managing by what we see and what we can feel in front of us, which was the kind of manager I was before Project 23 Days in advertising. So that, I see it's a real mix, actually, and people still struggling or challenge as organizations to work out how we can be inclusive, how we benefit from flexible working, but also, But there are still some jobs, aren't there, that require bums on seats. But I wonder if some organizations, some industries are a little bit too willing to define those bums in seats jobs as a bit too broad. And actually, there's an opportunity to do things a bit better.
There's a lack of flexibility.
Yeah.
And also, I think, maybe a sense of humility amongst people. I mean, look, I'll be honest. I'm a producer. The vast majority of what I do on a laptop. And I do probably silently with earphones in.
Yeah.
And, I'm not bigging myself up. I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not a brain surgeon. I don't save lives. A lot of my job is farting, if you pardon the French, farting around on the internet and a spreadsheet. I don't need to be in the office. So yeah. I don't know. Maybe people are just sort of, you must be in 3 days a week because you're so important. It's like, well, there needs to be more flexibility of people really saying, well, look, does your job need to physically, maybe people need a bit of humility in sort of saying, well, I don't really need to be in because a lot of what I do is just Microsoft Teams messages.
Yeah, I think I'd like to chime in a bit because I've taken the staff projects up and quite a lot. And I think that at the beginning I was working as a creative director across a lot of projects. And I really think that COVID was brilliant in giving access to people, diverse people to work on projects, opening things up. I think there were benefits to that, which have been really good. But I think, let's be honest, it also affected creativity negatively in certain aspects. So I think what we're seeing now is a kind of pendulum swing back to try and address the negative aspects of it, which started to dominate, particularly around the edit. And I think, there are big elements of the edit where, you are doing it, like you say, you don't necessarily, you get on with it. But the conversation around the edit, especially when you're on a series with lots of edits working together and the ability for that kind of joint staring at the whiteboard moment or the popping your head around the door. I mean, I've worked with a company who recently had to mandate 3 days a week in the office for the edit producers and the editors. And they met some resistance doing that, but now everyone's working together. And I think it made edits take longer not to be having those dialogues, but I think creatively it made it more difficult. I found as well, you ended up in a situation where you're often giving notes rather than having a conversation. And then people would sometimes be, well, I don't really agree with that, because you're not in the room to be like, oh, okay, what do you think? And so then you get this kind of pendulum swing where people exercise the notes to create a cut that you don't really want anyway, because what you actually want is a conversation. So I think the edit really suffered.
See, controversially, I would say that you don't need to be in the room for the conversation. And although having said that, as a returner to TV and you having, kind of flown the mast during, during the pandemic, I was an academic at Bournemouth University. So when the pandemic hit, everything went online overnight, and we had to basically run degree courses with students that were young adults, that were frightened, that were all over the place. And by the very nature of a TV production degree, they had to make stuff. There was no option. Otherwise, it's a big machine. It doesn't stop, and you can't delay exam boards or say, can you stay on for an extra year? So there was a kind of a real necessity to create an environment where they could do that. And I would say that what I learned through that, having to go through that, and also with colleagues who may be world thought leaders, but can be really digitally illiterate, one of the things that we kind of discovered during that phase was it's not just kind of what you were saying. It's not just about disseminating information. It's using these online spaces to create opportunities for collaboration and communication. I don't think that flexible working like that works if you just try and take what you would do in person and translate it to online. It's got to come with its own framework in order to make the production succeed and thrive.
Yeah, well, I had to manage quite a lot of projects through COVID that were in the edit, and people did amazing jobs, and we found ways to collaborate. But I think on balance, it was a more difficult experience than the joy of collaborating in person some of the week.
I think there's I have a concern that in terms of the creative side of things, and I actually think creatively, a lot of online tools actually do compensate for the lack of face-to-face in many ways. But I do worry that this move back to the development conversations have to happen in person is quite limiting in terms of the types of people that can contribute to those ideas. Because if we're saying we can only develop in person in regional hubs or in London, what about the people that don't live near regional hubs? You know, so one thing that I just thought was great for us in lockdown was just the number of people that were contributing ideas from places that, you know, don't usually get in the room in development. I haven't had much experience of the edit, so I can't really comment on that. But I do think like the benefits far outweigh the negatives for us as a company anyway. You know, like before COVID, we were based in London. We're now well over 50% outside of London. And, you know, it's funny when you go on calls with commissioners and they say, you know, where are you based? And you're kind of like, everywhere, you know, is the truth. You know, and you can bring in people from all over the world. You're not just limited to the UK. Like our production manager lives in Madrid, you know, and manages to run productions from Madrid, and it works perfectly well.
And so, have you objectively noticed that having a wider pool of individuals to contribute creatively from, of course, their kind of lived experiences and backgrounds has given more breadth of creativity to you as a creative director?
100%. Like, you know, I can think of one example of a production where someone who was neurodiverse was able to work on it because of the remote working, and actually because of their particular skill set, the quality of the work was so much higher. If we'd insisted on that happening from an office, we wouldn't have employed that person, and the work would not have been as good.
And with the animation development that I've been working on, it's a part of a scheme called BBC Ignite, which is basically trying to look for the next animation hit. They've managed to they've managed to get consultants and writers from, you know, one of the projects has got Jeffrey Yohallam, who was the consultant for Assassin's Creed over in LA. You know, we've been able to draw on talent. Our head writer was the ex-director of development for Disney. Because of removing those geographical boundaries, it opens up the talent pool even more, in my opinion, anyway.
What I felt was difficult during COVID, because I think you're right. I think the big plus is that opening doors to people. It's brilliant. But I'd really be interested to hear from like researchers, assistant producers and things, because what I felt, it was really hard to teach people who hadn't done something before online. You know, that kind of thing when you're in the office and you're aware of someone and they can listen to you doing a call and you can hear them, and you know, and there's that support that comes from that group. And what I felt was that kind of bringing that next generation along, you know, if you've got a set of skills and you can adapt. But I really, you know, and I found it in development, yes, you can bring in new voices and have a creative thing, but that kind of, when you're talking to a researcher or an AP saying, I'd like you to go and do this for me, it could become very prescriptive, with people not really getting that kind of, well, I might be asking you for this, but that's, you know, those people who are new to the job. And I feel like COVID might have not helped those people very much, but I don't know. I'd be interested to know what people felt like about trying to start.
Yeah, we do have some comments actually about the junior people. I mean, I think overwhelmingly from reading comments and listening to you guys, I think we all agree that flexibility is a very good thing. We do work in a creative industry though, where being with people is largely important, I would say. I mean, do you think, I mean, there must be some positives to being in person, right? I know that most of the room here is very much working from home is brilliant, but being together.
No, I hate working from home. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I loved it at first. I loved that, having my, you know, pajamas on my bottom and like being able to, but I just feel the benefits of those serendipitous conversations and the support and not so much the scheduled things, but the things that happen in between. I just really miss it. I don't think it's the same.
I think though, we shouldn't confuse necessarily working from home with working remotely, because you know, a lot of people who work remotely do go and work from a WeWork, and they're surrounded by people, and it's very social, and you're learning from other companies as well. And you know, or you're sitting in a cafe and observing life. So you know, I think sometimes employers think people are sitting at home, you know, playing on PlayStation and watching Netflix, and actually you can immerse yourself in the world and find stimulation creatively and be remote. So
I think that's a very good point.
Mm.
And the word flexible is coming up quite a lot here. I mean, we should probably investigate what that means. Again, I think flexible gets mixed up with, I just want to work from home all the time in my pajamas so I can do some washing and pick up my kids. Like flexible, I mean, Elaine, what do you sort of define as flexible in your line of work?
I tend to think flexible is what does an individual employee want and need, and what do we as employers need to do or set up so that that person can give us everything that they want in all their brilliance. So if Belinda's kind of saying, I hate working from home, cool. How can we set you up so that whatever it is that you like when you're not working from home gives you whatever it is? Maybe that's a balance. Maybe that's, you know, some focused time that is, you know, slightly removed from the hustle and bustle. Maybe it is the hustle and bustle and I like that ambient sound. But really that for me is, it's about change, right? It's about for me, it's about, if I zoom out of this conversation, there is an absolute will and a desire for everyone I talk to in the TV film market, that is, or the industry, that's saying we want to change things. We want to open the doors for more different types of talent to come in. So we are probably in a phase where we are trying to and have to work out, what do we need to do differently in our processes, in our creative get-togethers, in our touch points with, you know, the team, how we hire people, which catches up to be able to embrace and say yes to lots of different types of people.
And I think that's the intent, basically. Yes, the process exactly need to underpin it.
Exactly. And picking up on Belinda's point, it is hard. I think it is hard because we're used to doing things in a certain way. And what I love about conversations like this is to start talking about, okay, what specifically is hard and what are other organizations doing or have done well, even in part, so that, okay, I can take a little bit from that. But I think what we're doing is we're just rushing to go, 3 days, 5 days, or mandate everyone in. I know I'm oversimplifying things. So I kind of think flexibility is really about seeing people's differences, which is at the heart of diversity inclusion anyway, and working out what we need to do differently. It just so happens that this is a really big systemic thing that we're changing, where I'm a manager who was taught how to manage with someone next to me, to teach someone. But it is about investment in what tools are there out there, what have other people done, perhaps, and this is, you know, I'm not the most popular person in the room when I say this, but perhaps slowing down in order to move forward. The pace of this work is ruthless, doesn't allow much for that.
I just wanted to...
I do think... Oh, go on, Jason.
No, I just wanted to give, for any freelancers on the call, there's this amazing app that we use that's basically an Airbnb for offices, except you're not working in people's homes. It's actually their proper offices. It's called Near You. And basically you can find throughout all of the world, but it's particularly good in the UK, you know, you'll find offices in the smallest of towns. And we give this to all of the people that work for us, free access. They can book an office anywhere in the UK. And it's charged to the company. So, you know, although we're offering you can work from home, we're not saying you can't go into an office. And I think
there's a production, Captive Minds, I know, do the same thing. They're completely virtual and remote, and they only come together for the, you know, the meeting times that they need to. And I think actually that's the key. I think face to face, it's about having a refined palette. It's about kind of going, when do you need to get the team together in order to kickstart and brainstorm these ideas? And you know, like on the BBC Ignite animation, we've probably gathered in a year 4 times, but they've been 4 times where they've brought all these people together, you know, in writers' rooms where work gets, like, loads of work gets done. So I would say, yeah, like, and then it's finding coping mechanisms for the stuff that isn't in person. It's like, how do you make this as good as it would be in an office? TV is full of problem solvers. If we just kind of applied that mentality of problem solving to kind of how do you make these remote and flexible spaces work, it would be it'd be a no-brainer, and it's worth it.
And I think that's it. Sorry, just to append onto, I'm just going to ride your wave there, because it's the problem solving piece is one, but I think from mindset perspective, and I kind of did it as well, isn't it? It's like, okay, this is a problem now. How do we do this? But it is what it would open up if we do it. What opportunities come with that? If we do things differently, yes, it's a pain in the ass because I'm used to doing this and that's quick and efficient and everyone knows what they're doing. But actually, if we do things differently, what new things come? Who gets a chance that wouldn't have? What ideas would we get? How much time do people get back, and what do they do with that time that we want them to do?
Life.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm in the
Life.
Kimberly camp of like laundry, and you know, I hate to say it, on days when I'm home, I am fitting in laundry. It's not that glamorous around here.
Yeah, but probably it means that you're less stressed out.
Yeah.
You know, you're able to meet your home life obligations. You don't have to become a nun to the cult of TV in terms of, you know, sort of not having the time for those other things. And ultimately, that all leads to the pressures that come at mid-career, which is, you know, what is driving people out of the industry. It's not being able to
Agreed.
manage life and work at the same time.
Agreed.
I used to
Thank you for
think
your
that,
comments, everyone, by the way. I'm going to start sharing some of them. Go on,
yeah,
Belinda,
I mean,
what
I
did you
used to when I first started like remote working, I used to really like the peace and quiet, you know, because when you go in the office, people are talking to you and it seems to take ages to get things done, and you have all those conversations like when you're trying to work. And now I kind of realize the importance of those relationships, and however hard you try to create those relationships in a virtual space, I think when you make an appointment for something very specific, which makes you very focused, there is an element of that kind of creativity that is lost in that, which I don't know quite how to solve that problem.
See, I come at that from the other side, really. I mean, this makes me sound like a bit of a curmudgeon.
I think a lot of this.
Did we lag out there a little bit? I think maybe 2 or 3 people were speaking at once. May I continue? Fabulous. Okay, I was saying I'm a bit of a curmudgeon, in the sense that as a freelancer, I don't have solid contacts with a set of people that I work with every day for a long while. I jump into roles for, it might be a week, might be a month, might be 3 months. I meet some people. I know that I won't build long-term relationships with them. I may, you know, keep professional relationships with them in terms of working with them again in the future, or, you know, staying on LinkedIn. But they're not a core group of people that I work with and, you know, and want to build friendships with. Again, I know that makes me sound a bit
I'm not talking about friendship building. I'm just talking about professional relationships, because most of us work in an environment with rolling relationships that change all the time.
Yeah, but my input there is that for me, I very much enjoy working remotely because you know, that those relationships that I build with people, potentially I sort of just see myself as a freelancer. I'm going to go in for a short while and do that. I don't really need to build fantastic relationships with people. I just need to get the job done. And not being permanent staff, maybe I just see it from that perspective. I'm here to just get the job done. And, you know, do the job that's been required of me.
And also, it's about thinking about those things that you can do in the virtual space that mimic the physical space. So if it's a daily kickoff meeting, half hour, everyone together, if it's like, I don't know, I had with my co-creator on the BBC Ignite thing, we would have an open Zoom call and we'd mute it. And it was almost like the equivalent of being able to open up the mic and go, I'm stuck on something. Can we just talk about this quickly, please? And it's building in those opportunities, those sort of front-loading information, building opportunities to make sure that you're talking to each other, having ways of getting a hold of people if you need to, and agreeing all those rules up front so people don't feel like they're being bothered or it's unusual or, you know, that kind of thing. And I think if you can do that, there's a lot that happens in the physical environment that you can replicate online, because we are people's people. Of course, we're going to build, whether it's for a week, a month, a year, whatever, we're going to build those relationships because it's the very nature of the kind of people that work in this industry.
That's a good point.
I do think a lot of this is about communication, actually, isn't it? And being clear about what is possible or asking what people want. You know, flexibility, I do feel like it's about asking the person what it is that they need to work at their best, and then trying to make that happen. And of course, you know, if you're filming something somewhere, you need to be in that place. But other than that, should it not be up to the individuals to decide what what is needed of them to make their job, to make their role and their part of a team as good as possible.
Yes.
I wonder as well whether it's just managers. I think it's harder on managers, remote work, and I'm a manager. And it feels easier as a manager to think presence equals someone is working, because if you can see they're there, you think they're working. But in reality, that work may not be productive. You know, they might be exhausted from their commute or distracted by noise or whatever it is. So I think a lot of it is down to managers having to think about it very carefully and work that little bit harder, which I know when you're a manager, you're quite exhausted already. But I think once you've made that investment in those resources, whether it's communicating on Slack or doing daily Zoom meetings or whatever, it does get easier. And we've just kind of rushed back because it's revert to like what we know. So yeah.
Abby. Yeah, Abby, thank you for messaging. She's very passionate about this subject, and Abby is just wanting to know why this has happened. Why is there this sudden feel in the last month or two, tangibly, this rush back to the office? What's happened? What do we think? Why is it happening?
I mean, I think it's because lots of indie bosses have expensive buildings, and they're like feeling, oh my god, I've spent all this money on the building, and like no one's here, and some of it is psychological, just of like, you know, thinking, god, that's a waste of money. And some of it is just old school ways of working. It's hard to break a pattern, isn't it? If you've been running things that way for 25, 30 years as an indie boss, it's quite hard to like change your mindset. And I do think the push is coming more from the management than it is from like people.
Yeah.
You know,
I agree.
I think there's some macro issues at play as well. You know, the economic downturn globally, in this country, in the UK certainly, you just get a lot of people contracting to what we think we know best. Okay, so I need my people close. I need everyone to come back in because we really need to buckle down now. That type of thinking, and it is that old school way of thinking. And then before you know it, okay, because this is still a narrative. This is still a conversation at C-suite level of what are you doing? Oh, what are you doing? Okay, maybe we should do that too. So it does spread a little bit like wildfire. Yeah. But I do think we have learned so much in terms of the asking piece that you mentioned, Kimberly, like, to ask people, what is it that you need? Because every now and then you might get a team who are, you know, I just want to be in the office. Do we all want to be in the office? Do we all want to be together in the physical? Yes, perfect. But I think we need to be able to, we need to be able to ask people. But secondly, I think we need to be able to kind of build like the trust piece in here. It's harder for managers because I think, if I'm being honest, we haven't always had that default position of, I trust you that you're going to do what you need to do to the best of your capability. And we tend to conflate management and mentoring with, I need to watch you, I need to keep an eye on you, which is not the case because we're all grown-ups here. But I think that's where it gets a bit conflated with, you know, need to buckle down.
I think. Oh, sorry.
Go on, Hayley. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's a thing, is the way that I put it. Like remote and home is a thing. It's not something that you just go, okay, we're going online. Okay, we're going back to the office. It is something that needs, in terms of management and teams, like structures, processes, thinking about. And although that sounds like a lot more work, I think that actually it's because it's not a familiar skill set yet. So it will be less of work, and it's often just taking the formal things that you would do in terms of management and making sure that it's clear up front in advance. So knowing when your kickoff is, knowing when do you know what I mean? Putting those things in so that people can diarize and commit to them, but treating it like it's not just an add-on to the production, it's an integral part of it.
I think Elaine's 100% right about going slower. I think it would be great to have someone from production management here, because I know for a fact that everyone feels that edits cost more under COVID, and there's a cost driver to wanting people to be in person because they haven't got the resources to wait for that to evolve while it's costing more money than they're being given to make the show. So there are problems with the transition that haven't been solved, which are actually adding costs to productions, because edits do definitely take longer when they're done remotely. However much we try really, really hard to make it creative, the fact is And I know a lot of people in a lot of companies who on the production management side would say that that's the case. So I think it's not that people
thank
don't
you for
solve
referencing
it.
that, Belinda, actually.
It's not that people don't want to solve it and can't be creative little bunnies and make solutions. But what's happened, like I was saying at the beginning, is this is one of the negative things that's come out of the last 18 months. And it's partly costs going up as well and people desperately trying to manage that.
Possibly the infrastructure as well needs kind of, I can see if it's not managed, if it's not managed, as in it has the potential to, and I don't question anything you're saying in terms of it's costed more, but I also know that there are production companies that have the tech in place, like ITM Productions, that do majority kind of remote edit producing type stuff. So there are methods, there is tech, there are ways of bringing this cost down, but are we actually sharing best practice? And do we all know about it? Do you know what I mean?
And actually stepping in for the production manager's voice, and unfortunately Evie, our head of production, who was going to join this call, couldn't make it. But Natalie Brooke-Reynolds, thank you for joining in, Natalie. And she's saying she knows a lot of production managers who are looking to leave the industry, feeling like, they're being marginalised with this kind of move back to London. But also, I have to say, from with my talent management hat on, and sort of industry temperature check from where we're sitting, it is still a lot quieter than it has been in the last winters. Pre-COVID, the industry has not picked up as fast as I think everyone was hoping after a slower winter. So I feel like that sort of emotion amongst production management and people sort of talking about flexible working it's an unfortunate clash of a few things happening at once, where people understandably who've been out of work for a while are seeing other people starting to get jobs in London, but the fact is there isn't enough work out there for everyone at this moment in time as well.
I think it is about zooming out a little bit, because if we're trying to change things, then the fastest way to do things isn't going to be the right way to do things for a little while. And if it is about keeping costs down, as an example, in our current way of doing things, then we can always just go back to the way that we know. But the point is, I think that's a short-term cost loss, right? Because on this particular production or whatever kind of industry that people work in, that I'm going to hire someone quicker, I'm going to do the job quicker, whatever it might be. But if you zoom out and think about the industry over time and what we're trying to achieve, who's going to leave, what talent will we not attract, who's going to drop out of this is a much longer term problem. And I swear to God, whenever I talk to any C-suite in this particular industry, everyone talks to me about how much they want to change things. Mm-hmm. But what are we trading off here? Because something has to be traded off. So I think I empathize, because it's a real challenge when we're a juggernaut. But, I think we need to look at what we lose when we go back to the old norms, or acknowledge that there shouldn't only be one way of doing things. And I think that's the simplest way to look at it. Previously, there's been typically one way of doing things, whether it's working from an office or the type of people we hire, the way we run meetings, the way we run creative meetings. But we need to acknowledge in flexibility that there's more than one, there isn't a default. And the more we can do that and shape things and change things where it suits more people or a particular type of people, then the better we'll be as an industry over time. But obviously that needs as you've all said, the investment, the time, the thinking, the brains to do it. That's why I don't want to catch people out, but it is sometimes frustrating when we're told this is what we want to achieve long term, but there isn't any perspective on the long term.
Yeah, and the whole thing about the mid-career brain drain, like the TV industry is suffering a huge skills shortage. People are exiting, in what was it, like April 2020, Viva La PD sort of saying that 50% of freelancers were considering leaving the industry for good. And I think all you have to sort of think about is like, what is going on for those people at this time in life, at mid-career? What else are they contending with? And for me, I'd even go as far as to say that flexible working is potentially a massive plug in the mid-career brain drain. If you want people who have got skills and talent to be able to make things work, you need to think about like how to accommodate some of those things so that they don't have to make the choice between caring for a parent, or a child, and working in the industry, because that way you lose everyone and you're not representative.
I can potentially give a personal case study here. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but when COVID hit, as I said, I kind of moved back to Manchester, as I'm sure you can tell from the accent, which is where I'm from. And I didn't really have time to think, how will this impact my career? It's COVID, we're all moving back. My mother was in the at-risk category, so I moved back home to Manchester to care for her to a lessening extent as time has gone on. I'm still here in Manchester. I can't leave now. I still have care duties for my mum. I've got a long lease on a property, and I have been considering leaving the industry. There's a friend of mine that owns a logistics company that's looking for a logistics manager, and that's working from home, and it's simple. It's not as much money. It's not as interesting, but I'm sort of mid-career, and I can't go back to London. I mean, I don't think I'd really want to anyway, culturally, but I certainly can't. So these jobs that are now going back to 3 days a week, with either 3 days a week in London or a lot of travel to London, very London-centric in terms of where everything's happening, even though, of course, we were supposed to have this northern powerhouse, which now, because of the delay of HS2, is going to be 2043. I'll be 54 by the time this bleeding HS2 gets finished. I mean, that'll be the end of my career. I might not even be here by then. I mean,
that's slightly ageist, I have to say.
It is.
54 is still quite young.
But still, I mean, Northern Powerhouse, my proverbial bottom. I mean, I've been hearing about it since I was at university, and it'll still not be done till I'm 54. So I'm kind of stuck in Manchester now, and I have been I mean, this isn't a Tiny Violins thing, but I have been considering, at least in my own mind, quietly, what are my other options? Because I can't, unless I find a perfect opportunity in Manchester or Leeds or something like that. I can't do London. I just can't. So anyway,
and actually there are quite a few people.
Personal.
Go on, Jason.
I can say that the same reasons as Josh. So that's why.
Hayley, hold on one sec. Jason.
I can say that hopefully I consider ourselves to be in this boat, but there is a whole new generation of production companies coming up, though, that this is just not. They don't want people in the office. They don't need people in the offices. I would say 90% of old school indies, as I'd call them, want people back in the office, but I would say probably 70+% of people want to work flexibly. So there is a massive competitive advantage to indies who offer flexibility. And, I can say that myself, the quality of staff we can secure because we can offer flexibility and we have a policy of work from anywhere you want. We just wouldn't get those people, so I know it feels difficult at the moment, but I think we are going through a transition, and it's keeping an eye on those newer indies that are coming up, particularly ones working in the digital space, for whom this is just very native, this kind of remote work.
I think flexibility is there even in the older school indies. I'm working at BBC Studios at the moment, and they're very flexible. Certain productions have one day when they're all in. Some of them are in all the time. Some of them work remotely.
I'd say one day isn't even flexible enough. Like, I think if people want to come in one day, that's great. But I think if you live in, the remote.
Well, they do. I mean, or you don't come in at all because you live in another country, which they do too. So I do think your flexibility is important, but there are companies that are trapped because they've got to make this transition, and it's not because they don't recognize what you're saying. And I've started been playing devil's advocate about the be in the office thing, because I've worked remotely from abroad and from all sorts of places and done a lot of it. But they have got overheads, they have got commitments, and they have got cost drivers. So they're trying to kind of go find a middle way through things as well. And so I think everyone's squeezed, even the people who you feel like are the enemy are also doing their best to try and solve a very dynamic, very, very changing situation, because everyone wants their workforce to be happy, and it's difficult.
Yeah, I do think the TV industry and digital and creative industries maybe as a whole does struggle a bit with the communication piece at the top, because they don't think that far ahead. We all know that the industry is quite kick bollock scramble about stuff. Something gets commissioned, you jump on it. Where's the time in the leadership to consider these things? And it's almost like anything that is a bit harder or a bit more long-term strategy that involves extra thought. only, well, often happens at the smaller companies with the bosses that really care about this stuff anyway, and will do it outside of their hours. And I know that, there's a reason why people like me, probably like Jason, lots of people I know who've set up their own companies, that has been born out of not fitting into something else or not being able to be part of something else. Mine being because I had children and then felt I couldn't make my directing stuff work anymore. And I interviewed outside the industry as well, and then landed on setting up the company. So it does seem to me that it's that extra effort, and that's what you want to see from the people you want to work with. They're the sorts of companies you want to work at anyway.
But I don't think it's an extra effort for forever. It's a framework. It's a framework that you can pick up and you can put onto different productions. So it's not about like loads of extra work every time. It's the same way that you would approach a program in pre-production, production, and post. Do you know what I mean? You're looking at this, it's a checklist of considerations, it's conversations and agreeing, sort of like protocols and approach. That can be tailored production to production, but it's just about having
the right mindset,
awareness even of that.
I'm 100% with that. I've worked with a couple of independent TV production companies, and they've asked us to come on board, help them with greater diversity, equity, inclusion, or like their values or whatever it might be, behaviors. And inevitably, obviously, we're going to make recommendations after we do the learning and the workshops and the education. And we have definitely been told a number of times, anything that I think of as framework is just the way it's got to be, some kind of process. It's a bit too corporate. And I think there's something in there, and the kind of the natural tension that exists a little bit in an industry not wanting to seem overly corporate or overly stiff and professional, and needing to just come in to just, it's not that corporate to just have a framework where people understand and have some guidance and support, rather than it being serendipitous and I'm just going to do it the way that I think. And I think that it is a mindset shift, actually, in the awareness that we just need some steps involved here, and then we can build on it. We're not going to be able to silver bullet that and get it and nail it down straight away, but we can evolve those frameworks and processes over time, and we can do them still with our character and ethos and values as a whatever informal, live, jazzy kind of company if we want. I think there is sometimes a pushback to this over corporate feel, which I think is not.
I think you just said something as well, which was really important, because it's not about a one size fits all and I did it and it didn't work, so we're not going to do that again. It's about going, okay, right, what did we do? What worked? What didn't? What can we apply to the next one?
Yes.
It's cycles, isn't it, of production and learning. So that if you've got that as an objective, that you go, okay, flexible working is going to retain talent, therefore we want it. How do we make it work? You then take that knowledge and you admit, nothing's perfect. Nothing's ever perfect on a production either. But what can you take and put forward onto the next one so that it builds in momentum and it does become an amazing thing that works?
Yes. And who's accountable for that? If we're talking about production company, who's accountable for that role at the moment? That's the question mark that it's never really clear to me, because perhaps that's relatively new. I don't know. I don't know if anyone has any opinion on that.
And it's like, I think you were saying, Hayley,
there's a lot of comments, by the way, about
having those conversations at the beginning so people don't feel like they're bothering people, you know what I mean? And giving people permission to, I think that's really, going back to my point about, I don't know myself, but how junior people feel about this environment and how their opportunities are.
With junior people, it's almost got, the more junior the person, and I'm going back down to my university students, the more heavy hand-holding it needs. So the more expectation setting, information, sort of where are you going to get this information from? What are our check-in points? When are we going to refine and go, what is working and what isn't working? That all becomes much more necessary when people don't have the experience to be able to operate in that environment. But I think what we're probably seeing is it needs to come from the top. So it's not going to come from the bottom.
Yeah, I agree with that to an extent, Hayley, but I think you have to be, as a junior person, learning, like sucking stuff up from the room, and kind of being in there in person to an extent, to to just pick up on stuff that you didn't know. There's definitely an element of that. You know, I sometimes wish there were things with my colleagues that I was like, I wonder how they're pitching that series, or I wonder, you know, they could hear me actually on the phone to a client and then they'd learn from that too. There's certainly elements of that I think for junior people they're missing out on.
I mean, I'm in South by Southwest in Austin, which is a big tech conference. And it's interesting. There's lots of tools coming out that are supposed to recreate that feeling of the office, digital tools, you know, with breakout areas where you can go and chat with your colleagues. I mean, some of them look pretty bad, to be honest. But, you know, I do think it's just a case of waiting for some of these things to happen. Like we use Slack for those kind of informal conversations. We say Slack is like tapping your colleague on the shoulder. We use email for something more formal. You know, it's just selecting the tools that can help you recreate those things. We use Trello for our brainstorms, but I think those tools will improve. It's just and
even just using language like that, Jason, is brilliant. Just, you know, Slack is like tapping your colleague on the shoulder. That just being upfront and say, I bet you say that in your first welcome pack. I know the sort of company that you are, and that's amazing. I just think there is this knee jerk at the moment, and also some people talking amongst themselves in the comments about how because there are more people available, perhaps the London offices are sort of have, you know, they can cherry pick the people who are nearby, but as soon as it gets busy again, thank you, Lou Patel, for your comment, that they'll probably end up being more flexible. And it's really frustrating, and it shouldn't be like that, because it should be baked into the mindset about it, but it is probably what is happening.
And rather than when it gets busy doing a kick bollock scramble to try and make it work, why not kind of approach this from the beginning and get the teams that you want to, regardless of where their location is? Why not be proactive? You know?
Yeah. It really does seem like we are.
I always like to try.
We were all speaking over each other again.
There are some things that we can take away. I know, sorry, I think I've got an internet lag, which is really bad for hosting something like this. It feels like what the things that we're taking away are communication and clarity, having systems in place, actually kind of shopping for software that works, that, you know, consciously thinking about it from a leadership point of view, and then letting your team access those things. But, you know, and then really considering what is needed for your team, and what to have that individual person that you want to hire, what do they need as well. And Belinda,
but like someone mentioned, I can't remember who, that having someone accountable for that in the team, like someone who you know, so it doesn't just fall between the cracks. I think that's what I'm going to take away from this. It's like, we all want this stuff to happen, but are we actually empowering anyone to do anything about it?
Yeah, and I think attached to that, there has to be, just to add on to your list there, Kimberly, like, why are we doing this? Because the why we did it pre-COVID was, shit, we have to. And funnily enough, we all managed to do it. Yes, albeit at a cost at certain things. But now, if we look at it like, oh, how are we managing this problem? We're just not really going to get anywhere with it. It has to be, why are we doing this? Why is it a great thing for our, whether it's a competitive edge, or whether it's to find talent that we didn't have before, or whether it's to get new creative ideas, whatever it is, we have to bake that into, as well as the person who's accountable for it, because change, as we know, can be hard and tough, and it can be very easy just to revert back. So I think we need to have our eye on, oh God, I'm going to say it. We have to have our eye on the prize.
Opportunity, not problem.
Yes.
And I think software is a big way to fill that gap, as Jason was saying earlier. I mean, I've worked on a few virtual reality projects, and it's not massively hard, and it will only get easier as technology and the availability of certain technologies increase. But, you know, ship a VR headset off to a remote employee, and then there might be a bit of software where you can, you know, have a bit of fun with VR and
virtual office.
Like,
really, it's already happening in the world, in other industries.
It's already happening here.
It's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked on projects where engineers sat in different continents, had virtual meetings with VR headsets, and built buildings. Now, if they can do that, then why can't you sit down with a few people and have, you know, a bit of a laugh over a VR headset, over an Oculus Rift or whatever?
And there are virtual reality degree courses that do the same thing. They have all their classes within a virtual reality space, you know.
Right.
Well, also
So-
you can run your productions 24 hours a day, which makes it even more exhausting for managers. But if you've got people in different time zones, you can pass your edits between 3 time zones, and have 3 days work done in 24 hours. So
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, it's
yeah,
complicated.
That's almost like another live, isn't it? It's almost like another live, because I think how does this knock on to the question of how many hours, humans can physically do and fit in, and what's expected? Like the norm, is that the new norm that we need to break about how many hours an individual puts into production, and that's what's expected. Anything less is underperformance.
Yeah.
I think that's another live. I feel like I'm just, causing problems here.
I think it is complicated though. Like even in the comments here, working from home, lots of people obviously saying brilliant, flexible working, but it's also important that people turn off from working, and working from home can be your worst enemy when it comes to that, because you're so grateful that you can go and pick your kids up, or care for your mum or whatever, that you then log back on for way too long afterwards, and therefore burnout is a real thing.
But an individual that has the competence and the seniority and the trust, etc., to work in an important role remotely or working from home, obviously we said before those two are somewhat different, should also have the self, control and self-reflection to kind of say, right, I've done enough hours today. And I think that if an individual's in a position where they are working too much, that's not an industry problem, that's a particular role problem or a management problem. I've worked from home now for 3 years. And I've never had I work the hours.
I know people who are working from home.
I disagree.
And crazy hours.
Yeah, I disagree. I was working in the States, and I had that problem where, much as I was trying to time shift, I just had to keep working a lot of the time because the work was there.
But do you not think that's a part of the whole management thing of going, right, if we know that that's a potential problem, that we have check-in points, the pastoral care, like you would do in the office. How are you doing? Is everything okay? Do you know what I mean? It's just, again, a part of the normal management framework, but making sure that you're having those conversations. So, so that you can catch a problem when you see it.
That's the other thing. I think the issue with remote working is problems get worse before they're dealt with, because it's harder to notice them. And that's something I think I've noticed as a manager. Like, if you see someone, you can just tell instantly from their body language that something's not quite right, and things can get a lot worse before you're aware of things. That's what I
think, and it goes back, doesn't it, to the well, as uncool as it sounds, I'm going to have to schedule check-in times then with my peeps. I'm going to have to make sure I don't cancel them. I need to ask twice, how are you, and how are you again, whatever. And I think that's the stuff that we need to share with each other. How do we do that? But actually just asking, I think, is the first thing, isn't it? But really listening. Sometimes I think we are guilty of doing the check-in, but not really looking out for any issues or being aware that they might exist. Because burnout's here, whether, it's the danger, whether there's flexible working or completely in person. But I think that's the shift for me. Do we care enough to really listen? And sometimes I think because we're not sure what we can do if they tell us there's a problem, sometimes we don't always ask as much as we want.
Yeah, I would urge all of you to look at these comments afterwards, because we haven't had time to get to many of them, but I've been keeping my eye. They are really interesting. We've got people talking about logging your hours based on our chat about, working too long at home, and that there's various bits of software where you can do that. There's the Time Project. Yes, Michelle, people should look at the Time Project. And Albert, interestingly, the sustainability organisation, is that the right word for it? Is anyone talking to Albert about how reducing the number of commutes across a production could be captured? That is an interesting point.
Absolutely.
So that would be a win.
Better for employees, better for production companies, better for the environment. Why aren't we working remotely, completely?
Brilliant. I think we better wrap up. It's been so interesting. I hope that everyone watching has at least felt solidarity here, in that you're not the only ones going a bit bonkers trying to figure out what's going on, and that this is a period of adjustment and transition. And if you're a manager, to really try and put some of these things in place, have communication as top of your list, check out some of the software we've mentioned, decide how you're going to do things, and at least tell people at the top of your productions, because you know, even if you say, I kind of call them non-updates, even if you just say, we haven't quite figured out how to do this yet, but we're on it, and let me know how you feel. All of that just makes it feel like an inclusive place. And, you know, putting talent first, I think, and asking them what they need, if they are the right person for the job, asking them about flexibility is a big deal. Wow, I mean, I just want to carry on talking about it, but we better go and eat lunch and do work. So thank you so much, all of you, for giving us an hour of your time. Hayley, Belinda, Elaine, Jason from Texas, and Joshua, thank you so much. And yeah, I look forward to hopefully resolving some of these things with you all on productions in the next few months. But yeah, good luck everyone out there. You are not alone at all, and yeah, hopefully we can find you a job if you haven't got one on talentedpeople.tv, and send us your CV. You have to. If you don't know us, you need to do that. Right, speak to you all soon, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Thank you.